All right, we're starting chapter 6, psychoanalytic for Corey. So we're looking at psychoanalytic approach to groups, much like our theory class. You can apply a theory to groups. And so some psychoanalytic key concepts, of course, are the past, right? Freud thought the past was critical, the first 6 years of life specifically. And the group work for a psychoanalytic group consists of weaving between the present and the past. One of the key concepts of psychoanalytic is uncovering the unconscious that is kept out of our awareness. And that unconscious drive forces us to guide our choices. That consciousness is a small part of the human experience. And I don't know how you feel about that, but I know that I can talk a lot about psychoanalytic because there's a very psychoanalytic part in EMDR. And what I'm uncovering with the work that I'm doing is often an unconscious material that is outside of the awareness of the client, that the way that they have been reacting to their environment and triggers is related to something in the past. Very different than maybe what Freud thought, but it's stored in the limbic area and kept out of consciousness so that you can function appropriately. And an interesting idea to think about applying this in a group setting. The concept of anxiety for Freud is it results from repressed material bubbling to the surface of awareness, and he's not far off. A lot of our anxiety does come from just that. Sometimes we're triggered by our environments or people or faces or tones. Anxiety surfaces because the limbic area remembers the threat. I've talked about a lot, if we're walking along and we see a snake, we jump back. That's your limbic area protecting you. It comes on first to protect you. The rational thought, the prefrontal cortex, doesn't come on until after you've jumped back from the snake to see it's really just a stick. You can see how when we've been traumatized or we've had stressful life events, how that right limbic area will try to protect us maladaptively because it will respond in anxiety to keep us safe, but we may not need to be anxious because the threat has maybe passed, but that part of the brain doesn't understand that. This is very interesting psychoanalytic. There are key concepts in here that are absolutely accurate. And don't forget about these defense mechanisms, right? Freud loves those, and that we think those are a really good part of what he developed. The ego defense mechanisms are said to maybe protect the ego from threatening thoughts and feelings. Remember, ego is the part of the personality that performs various functions, including keeping in contact with reality. So, helping to cope with anxiety and preventing that ego from being overwhelmed. It makes perfect sense, is what I just said before. Holding those states and trying to protect the self. Don't forget... turn it back here. Don't forget all the ego defense mechanisms. Make sure that you look in your text and refresh your memory on repression, denial, regression, projection, displacement, reaction formation, and rationalization. You need to know those for this class, but you need to know them for your test. They're very important. And then let's go on to the concept of resistance. Resistance is exactly what it sounds like. I encounter resistance on a daily basis with clients as an EMDR therapist. I'm basically outlining this treatment plan that may have the horrific traumas of the past, some which they remember, some which they do not, outlined, and I'm trying to convince them to go back and revisit that in session, where they're going to feel all the same emotions and thoughts and body feelings as they did at the time of the event. There's a reluctance to do that because we have evolved in such a way and our brains allow us to cope in such a way that we can compartmentalize, we can function, and sometimes not well, but there's a huge resistance to actually feeling that emotion. And that's what resistance is about. It's not that someone's being difficult. Well, they may be difficult, right? But if we think about the case that I've been referencing with the student in the other class, interestingly enough, she has made progress with him. The one that's in drug court and his third time, and he's been so ugly to everyone. And what we did was help her to respond with motivational interviewing. And would you believe the last time they met, he shared some information about his childhood with her. And we found out, we started to chip away at the pain that this person has gone through. But when we have the resistance, it is protecting us from having to go there. And there was lots of transference and countertransference in this case. It involves the unconscious repetition of the past in the present, where it's coming out, transferring on to you. Then countertransference is where we're having an unconscious emotional reaction. That's what's happening to most people who are working with this person. We don't like to be disrespected, and we're already feeling inept, right, in our training. When someone challenges us in that way, it really gets us, and we transfer our own stuff back on. Good, bad, or indifferent, it doesn't matter. That's what happens. So as a group leader, if you were going to lead a group, and we do have EMDR groups now, I haven't been trained in that yet, but wow, I think it would be fantastic to be able to do EMDR in a group setting, in a support group. And in my spare time, I'd like to do that sometime. And maybe after we're accredited, I'll do that. By the way, as a side note, I just sent up the KCREP addendum. So for people who would listen to this next year, we'll already be accredited. But this year, 2021, it just went in today. So bravo. I'm excited about that. So roles and functions of the group leader. Now, one thing you will notice about your role in a psychoanalytic group is the fact that the relationship and alliance is important. It's very important. In classic psychoanalysis, it was not. That was not the role of you as a therapist. And that has changed. One of the most significant developments in this field in psychoanalytic therapy has been the recognition of the importance of that therapeutic alliance. So very important for you to be able to give support and also to understand countertransference, transference, and resistance, and encourage exploration in a loving, kind way. Being able to react to that in a way that's therapeutic in nature. And you have to really understand your own issues and your own countertransference issues and be authentic and genuine about that when you're in the seat, because that can help your clients and help have the group go deeper. So for the therapeutic process, there's the techniques and procedures for initiating a psychoanalytic group. And the way that psychoanalytic therapists really do that, more modern practitioners, they use something called this relational analysis. And that is an analysis of what's happening in the room, what's happening in the group, just like what we were talking about, where you can really grow from analyzing what's happening. You can explore the anxiety in the group. Anxiety is a key technique. Remember, we talked about what anxiety is and what is triggering that. How is that coming up? Is it evidence of more struggles that the person has had outside that microcosm of the group? Interpretation is used heavily in this theory. We've talked about this in motivational interviewing, and we don't interpret there, right? There's not insight. We ask permission. In this modality, insight and interpretation are important for understanding. We interpret what we think is going on and see if that's correct. And that's very much what I do in EMDR. And the other day in class, for those of you who have me in another class, that's to help clarify what I meant by that. We know free association. Remember in Counseling 5001 and theories, we did that activity. A free association, you just immediately, you say like a keyword and what comes to mind. If I say the word red, what do you think of? Free association. That's what we just did. That's a fun technique, guys, and one we may use in our group. That's a great technique. A lot of these are fun to use as a check-in or a check-out. It's the first word that comes to mind from what you got from group today, that kind of thing. And the dream analysis is also a part of this. And insight and working in key terms for dream analysis and psychoanalytic is manifest and latent content, because then you need to know that. The manifest content is as the dream appears to the dreamer, and the latent content consists of the disguised unconscious motives that represent the hidden meaning of the dream. So manifest and latent content. There's also insight and working through. This is kind of what I just mentioned. I talked about that insight and interpretation. This is the insight and the connection from the present and the past, and how those patterns are related to one another, and how you can see people overcoming that by facing the resistance that they have to facing it. And these are things you would be doing in group. The developmental stages is Erikson and Freud. We talk about their different tasks at each stage. As you remember, Erik Erikson, those developmental stages are really critical in helping you to understand what's going on with people at certain stages of life. And if they don't resolve the crisis at that point, then they can stay stuck in that developmental stage. We have a whole class on that this summer in lifespan development, where I have tons of fun recordings. It's a totally online class. So you'll be able to take that at your own pace, but that's what we focus on, because that's really important part of what we do. And like I just said, here we are. We have the psychosexual with Sigmund Freud, and we have the psychosocial with Erik Erikson. Those two theories for development. So psychoanalytic theory is continually evolving. Okay, that's the more contemporary trend, and the relationship is emphasized more. Other contemporary trends in psychoanalytic are object relations and attachment theory. Object relations theory is really focusing on that connection and interactional pattern in the early life. And there we can get into more of that, but you'll need to know that for your test, not for me so much, but for your NCE and PC. The object relations are interpersonal relationships. So relationships as they're represented intrapsychically. This approach includes self-psychology and relational psychoanalysis. The term object was used by Freud to refer to that which satisfies a need, or to the significant person or thing that is the object or target of one's feelings and drives. Kind of to make it seem, to help you understand a little bit better, it is like you're fused perhaps with mom when you're born. And to reach individuation of self, there should be a separation from that. And for that to happen in a adaptive way, all of that needs to be healthy. And you have to have a healthy relational pattern. And her as an object intrapsychically, that's positive. So that doesn't always happen, does it? So then they're talking about here how that can cause issues with you in the future. So in group therapy specifically, participants can experience how they're bringing very early patterns into their present interactions, helping them understand how that's still impacting them in the present day. This pattern might repeat. It's called the ambit tendency of an infant who goes back and forth between wanting to be held by its mother and wanting to be left free to roam and explore. In a therapy group, participants work through self-destructive interactional patterns. The primary goal in therapy group would create a corrective emotional experience and change self-defeating relationship patterns. Now, I can tell you this much easier than your text does, because I do this all the time with attachment and object relations. I have a protocol for EMDR. It's very strange. I know this is going to sound strange, but what I do is I go through guided imagery with a person that's their ideal mother or ideal father. And I take them from birth to 4. And we do a movie in their head of this other person. And then I tap it in with the bilateral stimulation of the brain. And somehow it heals the issue. It reattaches and heals attachment wounds. I think it has to do with the biological connection of the brain. I think basically there's scaffolding almost, or connections, if you will, that are not connected because you didn't get that need met. And somehow we trick the brain into thinking the need was met. I've done it with many adopted children and others, and it is an absolutely amazing